On May 5, 2026, Canadian leader Mark Carney fundamentally reshaped global geopolitics by formally launching the Indo-Pacific Democratic Trade and Technology Alliance. This was not a tentative suggestion or a theoretical concept floated for debate. It was a comprehensive, fully ratified strategic architecture backed by signed framework agreements. The speed and precision of the announcement caught Washington completely off guard, as the initiative had been developed in strict secrecy for months. Carney's move was a direct, calculated response to 5 months of aggressive economic pressure from the Trump administration, which had utilized tools ranging from severe auto tariffs and targeted potato bans to the sudden suspension of military pacts and restrictive technology regulations. By launching this alliance, Canada effectively bypassed American economic leverage, transforming from a nation under siege into a leader of a new multilateral democratic bloc. The diplomatic scope of this initiative is unprecedented in the post-war era. Canada successfully coordinated a diverse group of founding members including Japan, South Korea, Australia, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Denmark to create an integrated framework that functions independently of American market access or regulatory approval. Beyond these core members, Indonesia and Vietnam have signed on as observer nations with a clear established path toward full membership. This coalition was not built overnight. It represents the culmination of intense, quiet negotiations that moved from exploratory discussions to operational reality as American pressure increased. By securing these partners, Canada has provided a viable economic and security alternative for nations that had grown increasingly weary of American unilateralism. The significance of this alliance lies in its structural design, which directly addresses every pressure point the Trump administration utilized to isolate Canada. For months, the White House assumed that Canada's economic vulnerability, particularly its reliance on the U.S. market and security architecture, would force capitulation. Instead, Canada used that very pressure as the catalyst to build an alternative infrastructure that reduces structural dependency on the United States across 4 critical dimensions: trade access, mineral supply chains, digital regulation, and defense cooperation. Because this framework was developed while Washington was distracted by the bilateral trade confrontation, the alliance was already operational and strategically solidified before the American government could fully comprehend the extent of the shift. By the time the announcement was made, the diplomatic architecture was already too robust for Washington to dismantle through traditional bilateral threats. The alliance is built upon 4 specific pillars, each meticulously engineered to neutralize a unique tool of economic pressure that the Trump administration previously deployed against Canada. By establishing these pillars, the member nations have effectively insulated themselves from the volatility of American unilateral actions, creating a self-sustaining system that operates according to the collective interests of the alliance rather than the mandates of Washington. 1. Mutual market access. This pillar creates a preferential trade zone among all member nations, covering agricultural products, manufactured goods, and critical digital services. The primary strategic goal here is to reduce the single point of failure risk that defined the previous status quo. By diversifying their trade relationships, members no longer have to rely exclusively on American market access, which had been threatened by tariffs and trade bans. Instead, they can prioritize commerce with each other, ensuring that even if one bilateral relationship, specifically with the United States, becomes strained or subject to punitive measures, the member nations maintain a resilient and stable economic alternative. 2. Critical mineral supply chain. This compact is a masterclass in strategic independence. It pools Canadian, Australian, and Indonesian raw mineral resources with the advanced processing technology found in Japan and South Korea, and the specialized manufacturing expertise of the European members. By integrating these stages of production, from the initial extraction of raw materials to the manufacturing of finished components like EV batteries and semiconductors, the alliance has built a fully functional supply chain. This system operates entirely outside of American regulatory and market control, meaning no stage of the process requires American approval, thereby rendering American export directives or mineral sanctions ineffective. 3. Digital sovereignty. In an era where technology regulation is often used as a weapon, this framework allows member nations to coordinate their approaches to platform regulation, data governance, and technology infrastructure. Instead of responding reactively to American pressure to dismantle their own regulatory frameworks, members now present a unified allied position. This collective front makes it significantly more difficult for any single nation, including the United States, to force its own digital standards or policies on a member nation. By aligning their digital infrastructure and privacy standards, they protect their domestic markets from unilateral American intervention, while fostering a shared environment for innovation. 4. Defense technology cooperation. This pillar extends beyond traditional military pacts by building specialized coordination channels for defense technology and intelligence. While these nations maintain their existing commitments, they have created new independent communication and planning structures. These channels ensure that the alliance members can share sensitive intelligence and develop defense-related technology without being reliant on American joint planning systems. By establishing this level of autonomy, the member nations ensure that their security architecture remains intact, even if American military cooperation is suspended or leveraged as a political bargaining chip in broader trade disputes. The member nations joined this alliance not out of blind loyalty to Canada, but because they had reached an independent, strategic conclusion that they required a credible alternative to the increasing volatility of American trade and foreign policy. Each nation arrived at this decision, driven by its own specific national interest. Japan, for instance, had been quietly developing a strategy to diversify its economic partnerships for 2 years, seeking to reduce its exposure to unpredictable shifts in US policy. The United Kingdom, having faced years of frustration attempting to negotiate a comprehensive post-Brexit free trade agreement with Washington, viewed Carney's multilateral framework as a vital, ready-made path to secure its own economic future. Similarly, Australia moved to join after observing a persistent, accelerating pattern of American unilateralism that threatened to undermine the rules-based order on which its own prosperity relies. By joining, these countries are not betraying the United States. They are securing their own economic resilience. The market reaction to the announcement was both immediate and profoundly positive, signaling that investors and global businesses viewed the alliance as a stabilizing force. Within the first hour of trading, the Japanese yen strengthened against the US dollar, reflecting a flight toward currencies perceived as being part of a more stable, coordinated economic bloc. Australian mining stocks surged significantly, as the compact on critical minerals promised these companies a direct, secure, and long-term demand for their exports, unfiltered by American regulatory interference. Perhaps most telling was the Canadian dollar, which hit its highest level since the confrontation with the US began in February. This surge in market confidence confirms that the business and investment communities see this alliance not as a temporary political protest, but as a robust, permanent realignment of global trade architecture that offers a more predictable environment than the one currently dictated by Washington. The American government's reaction to the Indo Pacific Democratic Trade and Technology Alliance, specifically President Trump's public accusation of betrayal and his subsequent threats to review defense commitments, represents a profound miscalculation of global allied dynamics. In the eyes of the White House, the formation of this alliance was viewed through the narrow lens of a bilateral trade dispute, where any move to establish independent economic frameworks is interpreted as a hostile act against American interests. However, from the perspective of the 7 founding member nations and their observers, this alliance is not a betrayal, nor does it contain any legal provisions that restrict trade with the United States or require members to abandon their existing defense obligations. It is a defensive, structural reaction to a period of unpredictable economic coercion, designed to provide member nations with the strategic insurance policy they now feel they desperately need. The most consequential and dangerous aspect of the administration's response was the threat to review and potentially withdraw American defense commitments to Japan, South Korea, and Australia. By explicitly linking these critical, long-standing security guarantees to a dispute over trade and technology policy, the administration has inadvertently signaled that American military protection is now a transactional service, subject to cancellation if an ally makes independent economic decisions that the U.S. executive branch dislikes. For decades, these security commitments were viewed as foundational pillars of the global order, meant to provide permanent stability regardless of which party held power in Washington. By suggesting these treaties are now conditional, the administration has significantly undermined the perceived reliability of the United States as a security partner. The strategic fallout of this threat has been the exact opposite of what the White House likely intended. Rather than intimidating the founding members into dissolving the alliance, the threat of withdrawal has unified them and accelerated their efforts to build structural independence. Allies are now operating under the clear, shared conclusion that they can no longer treat American security guarantees as an automatic, unconditional backstop for their national survival. Consequently, they are viewing the development of the alliance's four pillars, market access, critical minerals, digital sovereignty, and defense technology, not just as an economic preference, but as an urgent matter of national security. The alliance has become a crucial hedge against the risk of an unreliable Washington, and as a result, the resolve of its members has only hardened, making the new architecture more permanent and more essential than it was the day it was announced. This alliance is designed for permanence rather than as a temporary reaction to current tensions, because it is built on structured, institutional pillars rather than flexible bilateral agreements. Its success depends on its ability to withstand the external pressures Washington will inevitably apply. Moving forward, the most significant indicator of the alliance's long-term viability will be whether the European Union transitions from its current observer status to full formal membership. Such a move would dramatically shift the economic weight of the bloc, effectively creating a global economic counterweight that would be nearly impossible for any single nation to ignore or dismantle. Beyond the expansion of the alliance, observers are closely monitoring whether foundational members like Japan and Australia continue to publicly stand their ground against the administration's threats. Their response will set the precedent for other allied governments. If they remain resolute, it will signal that the era of unquestioning compliance with unilateral American economic coercion is over. This unified front is essential for the alliance to maintain its credibility and demonstrate that its members are prioritizing their own sovereignty and long-term economic stability over short-term, diplomatic approval from the United States. Finally, a critical factor to watch is the extent to which U.S. congressional leaders intervene to protect ratified defense treaties from executive overreach. The president's threat to review defense commitments has created a constitutional flashpoint, as these treaties are typically subject to Senate approval and represent a core commitment of the American state, not merely the current administration. If Congress remains silent while the executive branch uses defense treaties as leverage in trade disputes, it will send a clear signal to every ally that the foundation of American security policy has fundamentally changed. If, however, lawmakers take action to uphold these long-standing obligations, it may mitigate the damage done to the U.S. alliance structure and create a necessary internal check on the administration's current trajectory.